Welcome to The Future of Real Estate with Wayne Morgan.
First thing I want to do before we get started is I want to thank you for your time. And the reason I do that is because years ago, a good friend of mine told me the most valuable thing anyone can give you is their time. How many of you consider your time valuable? May I see your hands, please? Okay, thank you. How many people don't like when people waste your time? Okay, good. Arg. So you have my commitment that I'm going to do my best in the next 2 hours to make sure your time and your money are both well spent. So, sound familiar? So thank you for showing up. How many have other things you could be doing right now? Okay, good. So I appreciate the commitment, the financial and time commitment you've made. So we're going to do our best to make sure you leave here happy you came. I got my time and money's worth. So thank you for showing up. Okay, who does not have a handout that looks like this? Who does not have one? Okay, who did not sign in? Anybody not sign in? Okay, can you come over here, please? Take care of them. Okay, how many of you have noticed the changes occurring faster and faster and faster? May I see your hands? Okay, thank you. How many get the sinking feeling at one point you might be getting left behind? Okay, good. I do too. I have nightmares. Some 15-year-old is at work creating software that's going to make me obsolete. All I'm saying is he or she better get up early. This is my mother used to tell me when I was younger. She says, you know, Wayne, if I can just give you a little piece of advice, let me just say this. Every day on the Serengeti plain, the lion wakes up and it knows if it's going to survive the day, it's got to outrun the slowest gazelle. On the same plane, on the same time, the gazelle wakes up. It knows if it's going to get through the day, it's got to outrun the fastest lion. So whether you're a lion or gazelle doesn't matter. The point is, when the sun comes up, you better get up and hit the ground running. Is it okay if I briefly give you a little bit about my background? Okay, thank you. I was born, it has to do with this event. I'll tell you why. I was given to my mindset that I have at a very early age. My grandfather invented a way to reline brake shoes on cars in the 1930s. And he created what is now a multi-billion-dollar industry, rebuilt auto parts. So when you see those parts houses and repair shops, Brake Check and Moe and Manny and all those parts houses, my grandfather started that whole industry, multi-billion-dollar industry. We had a remanufacturing plant in Pearland, Texas, and Atlanta, Georgia, and we sold Globe, Kmart, Wilco nationwide. So that's the environment I grew up in. And so I went to school. They said, you got to get a good job. When I came home, my dad said, you got to build a good business. I went to school, and they said, be a good employee. I came home, my dad says, be a good employer. I'm like, which one's right? And what I learned over the years is my education system taught me there was one right answer. And what I learned in the real world is the answer really sometimes is, it depends. How many have ever changed your mind when you got more information? Okay, good. So the answers change. The problem is once you take a test in school, you can't change your answers. But in real life, you can. So what we're going to go into is the mind shift that's put into you. When you're born, there's a battle for your mind. Your mom and dad want it. So they put their information in there. Send them to the school system. School system wants you to think a certain way. They put their information in there. Years go by, I meet people 40s, 50s, never had an original thought. So we're going to go into a day before we get into the principles of business or investing, and those are the topics we're going to be covering. And to me, everything begins with a thought. This building began with a thought. Someone had a thought. I'm going to build that building there. A lot of people have thoughts. Multi-million-dollar ideas. They can't figure out how to manifest it on the physical plane. You know what I'm talking about? It doesn't get built. So my question's always been, what's in the way? So this is what I grew up in, manufacturing, distribution, and business. And so I grew up with the business mindset, which is helpful because to me, a home is a business. A church, synagogue, it's a business. Your business is a business. Real estate is a business, right? And from my point of view, if you don't treat it like a business and run it like a business, you're going to be out of business. The problem is, who teaches business? I left school, I couldn't balance a checkbook. Very important skill to have. You know, I don't have enough, you know, when I used to know how I didn't have enough money, the bank would tell me. I can't be out of cash. I have more checks. How could this be? So I don't typically play, I typically do not play videos. I've never found them to be a very good teaching tool. But I made an exception in this case because I found an exceptional video. I'm actually going to play 3. And this one cost me $900. And for most people, $900 in video don't equate. So this is the first paradigm you got to get through. You know, what are rules around what you pay for? I bought a marketing book for $250 in the early 1980s, and my wife came out of her skin. She goes, "What's this? What's this?" You know, the oil crashed in 83, real estate crashed in 85, stock market crashed in 87. If you were in Texas and you were doing anything in terms of business or real estate, you probably got your hat handed to you. It was a fairly difficult decade to make money in. And in the middle of all that, I spent $250 I didn't have to buy a book that I needed. And my wife gave me what I call a pep talk. That book has made me millions over the years. So to wrap your mind around a book, so when I ask people about education, the problem is most education never made them any money. It's boring, it's dull, it's painful, and most of it's irrelevant. So when we're young, we're taught what to learn, and we're taught when we learned it. And now we're adults. So now you get to choose what you want to learn. So thank you for choosing to be here. I'll do my best to tell you, I saw this, I'm going to break some of your rules today. So for the next 2 hours, I'm going to break some of your rules that you have in your head. Is that okay with everybody? All I'm asking you to do, how many of you have ever heard somebody come at you and say something crazy? Okay, you go, "Bud, that guy's crazy." Well, from now on, what I'm going to ask you to say instead is, "That's an interesting point of view." Because what used to be crazy becomes the norm. That's how fast it's moving. That's how fast it's moving. And it is moving at lightning speed. So this is what we're going to go into. It's not right, it's not wrong. It's only your judgment about it that makes it one of those. There's no right, there's no wrong. There's only your judgment about it that makes it that way. So what we're going to go into is thinking process. What do you think? How do you judge? What's right, what's wrong? What's real, what's not? Hard to tell. I'm watching the news. What's real? What's fake? Who knows? It's interesting. So I'm going to play this video, and I'll be interrupting you throughout to make notes. So if you would, open your, turn to the second page if you would, and we'll start there. Shane, you ready? PJ, you ready? Okay, before we get started, I want to thank Shane and PJ. They're the one, they've created over 600, 700 now videos and animations to enhance our courses. So we're doing everything we can, not just to have a good product, but have a good delivery method. So Shane and PJ are our videographer team, and they're here to help us run the event today. So please give them a quick hand before we get started. Okay, so thank you guys. You ready?
And while we understand that this will require some fundamental changes in the way we do things, we do believe it can have a huge positive effect on the bottom line. We hope you will be open to our new idea.
Well, thank you for a very challenging proposal. I can assure you we'll give it our full attention.
Full attention? Yeah, I'll give it the attention it deserves and put it in the trash can.
She hasn't been on board for more than 2 months and already she's trying to change everything?
So things have been a little tough lately. We'll get back to normal and then we'll be fine.
They don't know how we do things here. They're way out of line.
It's so easy to say no to a new idea. After all, new ideas cause change. They create uncertainty. And it's a lot less bother to do it the way we've always done it before. New ideas are resisted from boardrooms to shop floors all across the globe. I could fill this museum with examples. I'm Joel Barker, and I'm a futurist. For the past 2 decades, I've been working with corporations, institutions, and governments all over the world, helping them to anticipate revolutionary change. I've been studying why people resist new ideas, and I've found a common pattern of resistance that has existed not just for decades, but for centuries. In Venice, between 1610 and 1633, the great scientist and inventor Galileo had to deal with that same pattern of resistance. He was trying to convince the leaders of the day that Copernicus was right when he claimed that the Earth revolved around the Sun and not the other way around. On clear evenings, Galileo invited those leaders to climb to the top of the Tower of San Marco to use his new invention, the telescope. He wanted them to examine the discoveries he had made in the night sky that confirmed the claims of Copernicus. They were not convinced. In fact, Galileo so antagonized the voices of authority that he was threatened with torture and forced to publicly recant his revolutionary concepts. Even after recanting, they placed him under house arrest for the remainder of his life. And you thought it was tough selling your ideas. In the end, history vindicated Galileo. But the question here is, what kept those men from appreciating his revolutionary new idea? And why does it keep happening, even today? When you think about it, the last 2 decades of the 20th century were amazing. A series of revolutionary changes occurred that have affected almost everyone on planet Earth. The space shuttle making regular flights to the International Space Station. The widespread application of total quality and Six Sigma management. The birth of the Internet, the World Wide Web, and e-commerce. The dissolution of the second mightiest nation on Earth, the Soviet Union, without having a war. The global commercialization of cellular phones and pagers giving people around the world access to communications that had once only been a dream. The adoption of the euro by countries who used to fight over the sanctity of their own national money. The radical new design of buildings and spaces. And yet these changes, as important as they have been to the global economy, were met with substantial resistance by thoughtful people around the world. Why? Why do people everywhere, in every culture, resist new ideas? That's the question I've been studying for more than 20 years. And I believe a powerful part of the answer lies within the pages of a book written by scientific historian Thomas Kuhn. It contains a concept that can enhance your ability to innovate, increase your capacity to lead, and help you to discover the future. You see, it all has to do with paradigms. I first ran into the word paradigm in Thomas Kuhn's book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. When you look up paradigm in the dictionary, you find it means pattern or model. Let me offer you an extended definition. A paradigm is a system of rules and regulations that does 2 things. First, some of the rules set limits or establish boundaries, just like a pattern sets the edges. Then the rest of the rules offer you guidance on how to be successful by solving problems that exist inside those boundaries. In a sense, they offer you a model for problem solving. So a paradigm is a problem-solving system, and a paradigm shift is when you change from one set of rules to another.
Set of rules. So on the first question there, what is the set of rules? Does 2 things. First thing it does is set boundaries. Second thing it does tells you how to be successful within those boundaries. So it's a set of rules. First thing, it sets boundaries. And the second thing, it tells you how to be successful within those boundaries. And then make a note under there. It acts as a filter, and that's the dangerous part. A rule is a filter. This is the way it's supposed to be. They're helpful and they're harmful. It depends. Okay? Okay. Please.
In his book, Thomas Kuhn explored how paradigms affected scientists. He discovered that scientific paradigms act like filters that screen data coming into the scientist's mind. Data that agreed with the scientist's paradigm passed through those filters easily. In fact, scientists saw agreeable data amazingly well. That's positive and valuable. But Kuhn also discovered a startling negative effect. Some kinds of data were very difficult for the scientist to perceive. What kind? Data that didn't match the scientist's expectations. In fact, the more exceptional the data was, the more trouble scientists had dealing with it. It was as if their paradigms interfered with their ability to clearly see the data. In fact, Kuhn discovered that in some cases, scientists literally, physiologically, were incapable of perceiving the exceptional data. For all intents and purposes, that data was invisible. Now, let me put Kuhn's findings in more general terms. All human beings, not just scientists, have paradigms that influence the way we see the world. We all constantly select that data that best fits our rules and try to ignore the rest. As a result, what may be perfectly obvious to a person with one paradigm may be totally imperceptible to someone with a different paradigm, because each paradigm filters the world in a different way. I call this filtering phenomenon the paradigm effect, and it is the paradigm effect that makes dealing with change and anticipating the future so difficult.
Isn't this the same information we came across earlier?
The paradigm effect can prevent any one of us, no matter how smart we are, no matter what line of work we are in, from finding breakthrough solutions to the problems in our lives. No one is immune. Now, up to this point, we've only been talking in abstractions. So let's take a look at some concrete examples that demonstrate just how powerfully our paradigms influence the way we see and understand the world.
Back to your handout. How do you know the rules? How can you predict when the paradigm is about to shift? You should have that question on your handout. You see that? Okay, how can you tell a paradigm is about to shift? Gets uncomfortable? Why? What happens? That's right. Someone starts messing with the rules. As soon as someone starts messing with the rules, if you'll look, you'll see that paradigm is about to shift. The rules are about to change. What is a paradigm shift? When the rules actually change. You can tell they're about to. Someone on the fringe will start playing with the rules. New regulations, new rules, they'll start changing them. It shifts when the rules actually change. The biggest real estate company in the world owns no real estate. Who is it? Airbnb. The biggest taxi transportation company in the world owns no cars. Who is it? Everything's changing. Last week on February 6th, Embark, which is a San Francisco startup, drove a tractor trailer 2,400 miles from the West Coast to the East Coast autonomously. Next year, there'll be cars with no engines, no drivers, and no steering wheels on our roads. So if you've ever had that driver in front of you, you want to run off the road, you'll get your chance next year. I don't know about you, but the only thing held me back was I would hurt someone. Now that that's off the table, they're open season. I'm going to get me a big old bumper. It's going to look really ugly, but it's going to work good. Bye-bye. You will see the stock market yesterday. What company took a pounding? First loss in 30 years. Their stock is lower than it's been in 30 years. Who's eating them? Who's on? Bye-bye Sears. Bye-bye Kmart. Everything's changing. So what's happening to us as real estate agents and brokers? HomeLight, Zillow, inserting themselves into the transaction, selling us leads. I wish. Right? Redfin. Well, they're actually a legitimate brokerage firm, but Zillow's not. HomeLight's not. They generate leads and sell them. Why not generate your own? So anyway, everything's changing. What happens when the rules change? When a paradigm shifts, what happens? Everybody goes back to zero. Your past success guarantees you nothing when the rules change. When a paradigm shifts. Okay. Please.
I'd like to start with an experiment similar to one that Thomas Kuhn cites in his book. I'm going to use elements that most of you know quite well, cards from a card deck. I'm going to show you 8 cards very rapidly. I want you to identify each of these cards silently to yourself as I go through them. I'll give you 2 seconds between each card. Okay? Ready? Here we go. Good. Now, just in case you missed some, let's go through the cards again. To make it easier, I'm going to double the time. Okay, that's it. How many of you noticed something strange about these cards? For instance, the second card was a red spade, or that the 5th card was a black heart, or that the last card was another red spade. I know most of you missed these exceptions on the first run-through, and many of you missed them on the second run-through as well. Yet I'm also willing to bet almost all of you identified the legitimate cards the first time they came up. Why? Remember what I said about paradigms and how they filter data? Well, you were trying to see the cards the right way. And so you saw the legitimate cards very easily, very quickly. But your card deck paradigm also made it difficult to see the cards that didn't fit the rules. So instead of seeing them as they were, you distorted the black heart and the red spades to try to make them fit your paradigm. That's the paradigm effect in action. Now, it's easy to write off this experiment as a funny deck of cards and irrelevant to real life. So let's talk about paradigms in real life. Millions of adults around the world have adopted running as part of their fitness paradigm. Yet how many of you would be willing to go for a 70-mile run? Yes, I said run. Now, in Western culture, the words 70 miles and run just don't go together. 70 miles and drive, yes. Run, no. But in northern Mexico, 70-mile runs are common among the Tarahumaran Indians. They do it as part of a religious festival. Now, why is it so easy for them, yet so impossible for us? Because it's one of the Tarahumaran paradigms. They run everywhere for fun. Would you believe our ultimate race, the 26-mile marathon, is child's play for the Tarahumarans? Of course, you might want to argue that it's some kind of genetic difference. But I'm willing to bet if any one of you had been raised in one of their villages, you'd run just like they do, because you would have learned their running paradigm. I brought you to Hennepin Technical College in Eden Prairie, Minnesota to show you another paradigm. This one has to do with automobiles. In 1976, during America's energy crisis, a group of students taught by Ernie Parker decided to build an energy-efficient car. Let me give you the numbers. The car weighed 2,000 pounds. It went 0 to 60 in less than 10 seconds. It got 77 miles per gallon, had a 16 horsepower engine. Today, 77 miles per gallon would be considered wonderful. You can imagine what that meant in 1976. But there's a catch. Anyone who knows anything about cars knows that those numbers don't add up. A 16 horsepower engine simply cannot accelerate a 2,000 pound car that quickly. Yet these students did exactly that. How? By utilizing a different paradigm. You see, the students weren't in an auto mechanics class. They were right here in the advanced hydraulics class, and they knew using their paradigm that they could capture and reuse energy ordinary cars waste. Let me show you how with this simple prototype. When this vehicle slows down, it doesn't use standard brakes. Instead, the front wheel turns a hydraulic motor pump, and it pumps hydraulic fluid into this storage cylinder, capturing otherwise wasted energy while slowing down the vehicle. When this vehicle is stopped, its gas engine turns a pump that puts even more fluid into the cylinder. All that pressure is stored energy waiting to be used. Watch. I can accelerate without even starting the engine. So the acceleration comes not from the little gas engine, but all that pressure that's been stored in the cylinder. The job of the little engine is to hold the vehicle at speed, and it can do that getting more than 70 miles per gallon. So here's a question for you. If the students who designed that car had been in auto mechanics, do you think they could have even conceived it? I think the answer is no, because the piston engine paradigm does not provide for waste energy capture and storage. Now, I'm not suggesting this vehicle is the next automotive paradigm, but it does demonstrate a powerful principle. What may be impossible to do with the old paradigm may be easy to do with the new paradigm.
So are engines coming or going? They're going, right? All we got to figure out is how to store that energy long enough. Elon's about got it figured out, right? So you'll see the thing about the space shuttle earlier. You saw what he did 2 weeks ago. His rocket went up, it came back down and landed on its legs. Never been done before. It's incredible. Okay.
In the late 1930s, an inventor was trying to interest corporations in his new idea. He brought it to the research department of a major photographic company. This is a model of the actual kit he used to demonstrate the process to one of their senior scientists. With little more than a box, a bright light, a specially coated metal plate, and some fine black powder, he created almost instantly and with no wet chemicals a very faint picture of a set of numbers. Now, we don't know exactly what the scientist said about all this, but we do know one thing for sure. He wasn't interested in that silly idea, so he showed the inventor to the door. But the inventor, Chester Carlson, had the last laugh. You see, what he invented was electrostatic photography, the Xerox process. Pity that poor scientist. He was unable to see beyond his paradigm, and as a result, Kodak missed one of the biggest business opportunities of the 20th century. In the early 1960s, Japanese manufacturers were known for things very different than today. Cheap toys, poor quality steel, imitations of American products, simple electronics. And that was our expectation for Japan, to always produce inferior products. But, unknown to most business executives in America, a paradigm shift was transforming Japan. W. Edwards Deming and Joe Juran, both Americans, were teaching the Japanese about total quality, or Six Sigma as we call it today. While the Japanese were learning to perfect things, American companies, in fact most companies around the world, ignored the whole quality idea because they saw no need to change. And so it was the Japanese who gained the high ground in quality. It was the Japanese who started an epidemic of quality that swept around the world. And it has cost American and European companies hundreds of billions of dollars to regain parity. That's how expensive it can be to miss a paradigm shift. There is a crucial and profound truth hiding behind the paradigm examples I've shown you. No matter how tall your skyscrapers, or how big your market share, or how global your organization, when a paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. Your past success guarantees nothing in your future. Toyota put General Motors back to zero. Dell did it to IBM. Walmart did it to Sears. The Japanese did it to the Swiss. Now here's a paradigm question for you. What nation used to dominate the world of watchmaking? Switzerland, of course. For more than 100 years, they were renowned for their watchmaking excellence. In 1968, they had 65% of the world market share, and according to expert estimations, more than 80% of the profits. Yet just 10 years later, their market share had fallen below 10%. And in the ensuing 3 years, they had to release 50,000 of their 65,000 watch workers. Today, what nation dominates the world of watchmaking? Japan. In 1968, they had virtually no market share. So, how could the Swiss watch industry be so rapidly destroyed? The answer is painfully simple. They were put back to zero by a paradigm shift. Many of you are wearing that paradigm shift on your wrists right now. The Quartz Movement watch. Totally electronic. 1,000 times more accurate than the mechanical watches it replaced. Battery powered. All new rules. So, who invented this revolutionary design? The Swiss themselves, right here in Neuchâtel at their research laboratories. Yet when their own researchers presented this idea to the Swiss watch manufacturers in 1968, they rejected it. After all, it didn't have any bearings. It didn't require a lot of gears. It didn't even have a mainspring. It had none of the marvelous mechanical complexity the Swiss were so good at. Therefore, it couldn't possibly be the future of watches. So confident were the Swiss manufacturers in that conclusion that they didn't even protect the idea. Later that year, the researchers displayed that watch for all to see at the World Watch Congress. Seiko of Japan walked past, took one look, and the rest is history. See? You know, if I'd been in Switzerland in 1967, I would have loved to have asked them a question I ask all my clients. What is impossible to do today in your business, but if it could be done, would fundamentally change it for the better? Maybe the Swiss would have realized that the Quartz Movement watch was the answer to that question and the answer to their future. Who knows? At any rate, it's an important question for you to ask at every level of your organization. Remember, what's impossible to do today may be easy to do tomorrow, just like the Quartz watch. Please keep in mind that this is not a story just about the Swiss. It's about you. It's about me. It's about any organization, any culture, any nation that assumes that what has been successful in the past must continue to be successful in the future. Let me remind you once again, when a paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. Not even the best watchmakers in the world could stop time. What I want you to remember here is that paradigms dramatically affect our judgments and our decision-making by influencing our perceptions. We must never forget, we see best what we're supposed to see, and poorly or not at all, that data that doesn't fit our paradigm. So if we want to make good judgments about change, if we want to lead successfully to the future, we must become aware of our present paradigms and then be unafraid to replace them. Now let me share with you some key observations about paradigms. Observation number 1. Paradigms are common. We have paradigms in almost all aspects of our life, whether it's personal or professional, spiritual or social. Observation number 2. Paradigms are useful. They help us identify what's important and what's not. They focus our attention. They give us invaluable guidance for problem solving. That's good. But, and this is number 3, and it's a warning, sometimes your paradigm can become the paradigm, the only way to do something. And when you're confronted with an alternative idea, you reject it out of hand. This can lead to a nasty disorder I call paradigm paralysis. Paradigm paralysis is a terminal disease of certainty. It is easy to get, and it has destroyed more than a few institutions. This reminds me of a maxim: those who say it cannot be done should get out of the way of those who are doing it. Observation number 4. The people who create new paradigms are usually outsiders. They are not part of the established paradigm community, so they have nothing to lose by creating the new. This means something very special for you. If you want to find the new paradigms that are developing in your field, you must look beyond the center, way out to the fringes. Because almost always, the new rules are written at the edge. That's where Apple started. That's where the Green Party began. That's where microloans were invented. That's where the women's movement was born. All of them at the edge. Number 5. Those practitioners of the old paradigm who choose to change to the new paradigm early in its development, like Galileo, have to be very courageous. Let me quote from Thomas Kuhn on this. A person who embraces a new paradigm at an early stage must often do so in defiance of the evidence provided by the problem solving. A decision of that kind can only be made on faith. The mark of these paradigm pioneers is great courage and trust in their intuitive judgment. And now for the last point, and the most important. You can choose to change your paradigm. Perhaps the greatest strength human beings have is that we are not genetically encoded for seeing the world only one way. You can choose to shrug off your old paradigm and adopt a new one. That's why I'm such an optimist about the future. There's a story I'd like to tell you. Once upon a time, there was a young man with a very fast sports car who loved to drive on curvy country roads. One day, he was out driving his favorite road when around the curve came a car out of control. Just as they were about to collide, the car pulled back into its lane, and as it passed, the driver yelled out, "Pig!" Well, the young man was shocked at her insult. So before she disappeared down the road, he yelled after her, "Cow!" He thought to himself, how dare she call me a pig? I was in my lane. She was the one who was hogging the road. But he wasn't too upset because he had gotten her before she got away. And so he put the accelerator to the floor, whipped his car around that curve, and ran into the pig. That was a paradigm story. The young man was responding with old rules. You call me a name, I'll call you a name. But when you think about it, the woman was really trying to warn him. I believe the next 10 years are going to be filled with people coming around curves yelling things at you. If you have paradigm paralysis, you're going to hear nothing but threats. On the other hand, if you have paradigm pliancy, you're going to hear some wonderful opportunities. The choice is entirely yours. Sometimes people get overwhelmed by the future. They look forward and think, how can we cope with all this change? The answer to that question can be found by looking back to our great-grandparents. In many ways, they dealt with changes at least as profound as what we're involved in right now. You must remember that in 1900, radio would still have been considered magic. Think about it, inaudible voices traveling through the air. In the space of 20 years, Henry Ford built his first automobile. Thomas Edison invented the movie camera. Madame Curie discovered X-rays. The Wright brothers proved the experts wrong and created heavier-than-air flight. The electron was discovered. The cause of malaria was identified. And a man named Albert Einstein proved that E equals mc squared, and the atomic age was conceived. The paradigms of our ancestors were forever altered during this time. And you know what? In spite of all that change, they did just fine. We wouldn't be here if they hadn't. You see, no matter how big or difficult the problem, there will always be some way to solve it. Even if one door closes, there will be another door to go through to get to the future. And just like it was for our grandparents, I am positive on the other side of that door awaits more than enough opportunity to keep us happy and busy for a lifetime.
You like that? Interesting. What was that first? Yeah, we'll go through these. Yeah, thank you. So the 6 things to know about paradigms. Number 1, they're common. What does that mean? Bless you. What does common mean? How many of you have paradigms? We all have paradigms. That's what it means. That's what it means. That a paradigm is a set of rules. Someone's rule is buy the new phone when it comes out. That's a paradigm. Some are, why do you buy a phone every year? Those are 2 different paradigms, but they are paradigms, and everybody has them. You've got rules. Between your ears are all the rules you've made up for yourself. Those are all paradigms.
In Charlotte, North Carolina, also part owner of the Charlotte Hornets. This business model came along called CarMax. And why did they create a new paradigm? People hate buying cars, right? You don't want to go and negotiate with that salesperson. Well, CarMax said, we're going to create all these dealerships, and you guys come, you don't have to negotiate. Rick Hendricks in 1992 said, I'm going to put a car dealership everywhere there's a CarMax. He's now the largest car dealer in the world because he didn't change his paradigm. I thought it was, you know.
Yeah,
and that's what we're being challenged as realtors.
Yes.
You know,
realtors are just anybody, right? Yeah, everything's up for grabs. Number 2, thank you. What's your name?
Tommy.
Tommy, thank you. Nicely said. I appreciate it. Well done. 2, they're useful. So they're common. We all have them. 2 is they're useful. They help us solve problems. 3 is sometimes your paradigm becomes the paradigm. The only way to do something. This is the way. Which is fine until things change, and then that may not be the way anymore. So the only constant is change. So 100 years ago, change took place fairly slowly. Now, if you look at change, it resembles the speed of information compared to what it was 100 years ago is an exponential growth curve. How many of you traveled abroad? How cool is it to text home? I'm in Rome. I'm texting my home. It's incredible. I know. It's incredible. So different. 4, the new paradigms are typically discovered by outsiders. People who have no investment in the way things are. Airbnb, Uber. 5, it takes courage, faith, and intuition to make the leap. It takes courage, faith, and intuition to make the leap from the existing paradigm to the new one. And 6, you can choose to change your paradigms. Who does not have those? Okay, next one. What is paradigm paralysis? He covered this on number 4. Yours can become the paradigm. I want to do just spend a few minutes on this. I think it's crucial. What is paradigm paralysis? What is the enemy of curiosity? Yeah, it's a disease called certainty. How many of you know people who just are certain about everything? Yeah. I find myself turning to them and going, how does it feel? They go, how does what feel? I said, how does it feel to be so certain about everything? What's that like? That's how we've always done it. It can't be done. That's impossible. If that could have been done, somebody would have done it already. Are you crazy? That's paradigm paralysis. What's the paradigm question? Here it is. So whenever you hear this or have this thought, here's the question you can ask yourself. What is impossible to do? What is impossible to do? But if it could be done, would change everything for the better. What is impossible to do, but if it could be done, would change everything for the better? Two questions that help. These are the ones I use. 2 years ago, the Real Estate Commission changed all the rules. How many of you are lenders or realtors? Okay, so who knows what Dodd-Frank is? Okay, who does not know what Dodd-Frank is? Okay, Dodd-Frank took closing documents from files this thick to this thick. They didn't solve a problem that didn't exist. So 2 years ago, the Real Estate Commission did the same thing to education Dodd-Frank did to lending. So the new rules are your courses will be timed, validated, and proctored. Every school goes back to zero. Your past success guarantees you nothing. So we spend $2 million to stay in a business we've been in for 28 years. But everything changes. You can wimp, you can whinge, you can whine, you can moan, but while you're doing all that, things are moving along. It's get on or get off, but there's no in between. It's like Karate Kid says. And remember the master of Karate Kid? Grape on right side road, good. Grape on left side road, good. Grape in middle of road, squashed. Okay, here are some other examples that he has from this book. This is hilarious. No, the $250 book was Jay Abraham. It was the paperback book. On top of that, she looks at it and she goes, "It's paperback." That's her paradigm. It's got a hardcover. It's worth more. It was his rules on marketing. It was Marketing Secrets of Genius Jay Abraham, and the guy was a genius. Here's the first one. In the 1930s, the General Electric Company supposedly had a practical joke it played on every new engineer in its incandescent lighting group. It went like this. Each new engineer began his job by meeting with the director of the division. The director would turn on an incandescent light bulb and observe. Do you see the hot spot on that bulb? In those days, you could almost see the filament through the bulb, even though the bulb had a coating on it. Your job is to develop a new coating that smooths that illumination out so the entire surface of the bulb glows in a uniform manner. With the assignment clear, the young engineer would go off to tackle his problem. What everyone knew was that it couldn't be done. After several weeks of struggle, the new engineer would admit defeat, and then, to hearty laughs of his colleagues who had also failed, he would be told the impossibility of his task. And it was a good joke, an illuminating initiation rite, until around 1952 when a newly hired engineer returned to the director, screwed the bulb into the socket and turned it on and said, "Sir, is this what you're looking for?" As the director looked at the first light bulb that had met his impossible conditions, he reportedly said, "Yep, that's it." The tradition had ended, the joke was finished, the initiation rite was dead, and a new way to coat the inside of light bulbs had been created. The guy didn't know it couldn't be done. The Bell telephone system was revolutionized in the late 19th century by a tinkerer. His name was Almond B. Stroger, and he invented and patented the switching system that took the operator out of the day-to-day loop of making connections. His profession? Undertaker, mortician, funeral director. Change sometimes comes from outsiders. Can you think of anyone more unlikely to revolutionize the most sophisticated technology of the day? And yet, he had his reasons, all brought on by the advent of the telephone in Kansas City where he lived. What he noticed was that the more phones that were installed in his city, the lower his business went. Previously, he had a nice 50% of the city's undertaking work. Now it was dropping precipitously. He had a problem. He decided it must be the phones. So he went to the phone company to talk to them about his problem. Of course, to us, his reasoning was absurd. What possible connection would there be? It turned out the connection was direct and dire. He discovered that the head operator, who trained all the other operators, was the wife of the other undertaker in town. And guess how she trained, quote, all her girls, end quote. When someone asked for the undertaker, they were connected to her husband. Mr. Stroger tried to discuss the problem. He suggested a way to return to the old percentages. She said no. He went home with a much clearer understanding of his dilemma. After much thinking, he realized what he had to do. He had to figure out a way for telephone callers to get to him without going through the operators. In 1888, he received his patents that led to automatic switching and rotary dialing. His solution to his problem was a solution to an enormous number of other problems. And yet, even today, more than 100 years later, many parts of the world still use the results of his tinkering. So there we have it. 3 kinds of insiders, outsiders, all rare, all precious, all hard to find. When they show up, we usually treat them badly. That's funny. I was lecturing at a famous research facility, he goes on. We took a break. I just finished talking about outsiders. A woman came up to me and said, you need to say one more thing about outsiders. We're fragile and break easily. He said, and Joe Barker goes on to say, I agreed it was a good point. Then I observed, well, you said we. What happened to you? She said she had joined a company 3 years before. About a month after joining, she had a big idea. How big, I asked. Worth about $500 million, she answered. She was very excited about her idea. She put together her notes and called the director. He said he'd like to talk to her. She said he would like to talk to him, and he replied by telling her to come on up because he loved talking to his new people. She said the first couple of minutes were friendly chit-chat, the getting to know you kind of talk. And then, when there came the inevitable lull, she pulled out her notes and began presenting her idea. As she talked, the director became more and more agitated. After just a couple of minutes, he stood up from behind his desk, walked around it, grabbed her notes, took her by the arm, and escorted her to the door. And at the door, and I quote her, quoting him, I hope you realize that if you had been here for 5 years, I might continue listening to you. And with that, he sent her on her way. I commiserated with her, then I asked what happened to her idea. She said that a competitor had just announced a product that very much looked like her idea. Ouch, I said. Then she made her closing comment and walked away. What she said, I'll never forget. I've had 6 ideas better than that one. But I hadn't been here 5 years yet. Okay, here's it. Here it is. The worst result of the paradigm effect. You are quite literally unable to perceive data right before your eyes. How many have heard the saying, I'll believe it when I see it? Okay, good. Just reverse it. I'll see it when I believe it. Okay, you want to hear some quotes? Yeah? Yeah. Here's some quotes. United States Navy will not be caught napping. Frank Knox, Secretary of the Navy, December 5th, 1941. With over 50 cars already on sale here, the Japanese are not likely to carve out a very big slice of the United States auto market. Business Week magazine, 1979. What's the biggest car company in the world? That would be Toyota. How does Toyota do it? Well, what the Americans do, what most manufacturing plants do in America, is when they build a car, they build an assembly line for each model. The Japanese builds an assembly line and builds many models off one assembly line. And they have this, I don't know if you've seen this, ever been to the factory, but the factories inside, all these robots are working. And the walls that separate the manufacturing from the rest of the plant are all glass. You can see right through and see the robots working. So as you're walking from one building to the next, what you're walking past is the assembly line. So as you're walking down the hallways, the robots are right there making the cars as you're walking. You can sit there and watch them. They're welding in there. Well, the Japanese had this policy that if you have an idea, you submit it, and if it's a good idea and they use it, you get half of the first year's savings. So this employee's walking through the hallway, sitting there, he's looking at the robots, and he's looking at the robots, and they're going, suddenly he has this idea. Stuffs it in the suggestion box. Next year, he gets a check for $100,000. Guess what his idea was? Turn out the lights. Robots don't need to see. The phonograph is of no commercial value. Thomas Edison remarking on his own invention. Flight by machines heavier than air is unpractical and insignificant, if not utterly impossible. Simon Newcomb, an astronomer, 1902. Sensible and responsible women do not want to vote. Grover Cleveland, 1905. It is an idle dream to imagine that automobiles will take the place of railways in the long-distance movement of passengers. American Road Congress, 1913. There's no likelihood man can ever top the power of the atom. Robert Millikan, Nobel Prize winner in physics. They're in the business and they can't see it. Babe Ruth made a big mistake when he gave up pitching. Tris Speaker, 1921. Who the hell wants to hear actors talk? Harry Warner, Warner Brothers Pictures, 1927. I think there's a world market for about 5 computers. Tom Watson Sr., Chairman IBM, 1943. The odds are now that the United States will not be able to honor the 1970 manned lunar landing date set by Mr. Kennedy. New Scientist magazine, April 30th, 1964. Here's the one I like the best. There's no reason for any individual to have a computer in their home. Ken Olsen, President of Digital Equipment, 1977. Have you seen the commercial with the child on the floor and the female parent, not the mother, I don't know who it is, but the female parent walks by and she says, "Are you having fun on your computer?" You hear what the kid says? Okay, how does this affect us? Here's some other examples. You have other paradigms on your page there? Yeah? If it is to be, it is up to me. That's a paradigm a lot of people have. If it is to be, it is up to me. This is on the top of page 2. Examples of some other paradigms. If you want it done the right way, what do? My customers want to hear from me. Nobody does it better than me. Here's mine. No one succeeds alone. I didn't do this by myself. This is not about me. So why don't people put teams together? Here's what you hear. I don't want to manage people. You can't find good help. They're too expensive. They cost too much. They won't do it. La, la, la. You hear all this? Yeah? How many have said some of these things? Okay, good. Here's what people are really saying. I don't know how to get the right people to do the right thing at the right time. Once you figure that out, put a team together. Here's my paradigm. No one succeeds alone. You're always better off on a team. Right, Shane? Absolutely. Right, PJ? You should hear these two characters up there. Okay, Tony, would you tell them the paradigm you caught me in last week? Please stand up. Please, okay, hold on. Come up here real quick. This guy's a character. Y'all say hi to Tony Romero. Hi, Tony. Come here. Do that.
Which one? What about the?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Who's pretty good at spelling?
Come up here. Stand
Who's
up
pretty good
here.
at spelling?
Hold up to your mouth.
All right.
There
All right.
you
Yeah, because they're taping me. I know it's not for the speakers.
Okay.
All right. I'll ask you since you're not good at spelling.
No. Don't put her on the spot. Just ask everybody.
All right. Ask everyone. All right. Spell folk, like folk dancing. Okay. Spell joke, like in jest. Okay. What do you call the white of an egg? The white of an egg?
Thank you. Give him a hand.
Yeah. The other one is
Give him a
spot.
hand. He did that to me a couple of weeks ago. I went, that's an interesting, my mind goes right into the paradigm, right? Joke, spoke, joke. So it's easy to get caught in them.